Okay, geweldig. So we were looking for an author of our mission. Our Mishnah says that one behema, whether it's a puzzle for a carbon, whether it's an iser hana, will never be bottle, even in 1,000, even in 10,000 kosher carbonas. The Gemara wanted to know why. So the Gemara said, is it because it's a davar sheyesh b'minyan? So the Gemara, that will be totally in the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, how to understand Reb Meir's psak that a bundle of fenugreek won't be bottled if it's kalayim. But the problem is, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that would be bottled, because Rabbi Yochanan held in Reb Meir that only es shidduchim limonos, only something that's exclusively only sold or bought by counting it individually. If sometimes it's sold in bulk, just like an animal, sometimes it's sold in bulk, that's not considered a davar chashiv, and it won't be bottled. So we need to find an author for our Mishnah who holds that even an animal is not bottled. So the Gemara says it's the Tana who's the author of the brisa, the famous brisa of a litra ketzios. And the Tana of litra ketzios holds that even an iser derabanan wouldn't be bottled if it's called over sheyesh b'minyan, if it's something that even if at any time it's ever counted, that's enough to give it a chashivos so that it will not ever be bottled. The kolshkim b'daraisa, surely in our case where we're speaking about isurim daraises, surely it would not be bottled. The Tanya we learned, litra ktzios, shadarsa al pi igel. So Rashi tells us how this works. So let's learn the first Rashi, first couple of Rashis actually. Kol dover sheyesh b'minyan, kol shedarka limonos klal. If you ever count it at any point in time, kigoin litros shel ketziros. A litra is a measurement. It's a measurement in volume of ketziros. Now, the normal way to buy pressed figs, sherei b'nei adam ein moichin b'minyan. Nobody sells a litra of ketzios as an item on its own by itself. Ella, what they do is darshan oisa beigel. If they have a litra of ketzios, they just press it in to an existing mold, and they just join it and make it into one big mush together with others. Umoicher kola igel yachad, and normally a full wheel of pressed figs are sold. Rashi compares it to a wheel of cheese. It's sold, the whole eagle is sold, but the individual litros, individual pieces, individual figs that make up the eagle, that's very rarely sold individually. But but since once in a while someone will say, I just want 1 litra, and they'll break off a litra of ktiyos from the big wheel to sell individually, which is an unlikely situation, but it happens, that's enough to give a litra of ktiyos a chashivos, and therefore it will not be bottled. I'm going to skip the next Rashi, and I'm going to learn the third Rashi, litra ktiyos, mishkol litra shaltenim. So right off the bat, I was wrong. I said litra is a shear of volume. Rashi says black and white. Litra is a shear of weight. Mishkol litra shal te'enim yibeshois. It's a certain weight of dried out figs. Shel truma, of truma. Shekitzam be'izmal bechlish shmoy miktzaya. The reason why they're called ktiyos is because when they're cut from the tree, they're cut with a knife that we refer to as a miktzoya. Shadar shalpi'il. So you had already a keli with pressed figs in it, and now you have an extra litra. So you just press it in and join it to an existing eagle, an existing wheel of pressed figs. Rashi Shadar shalpi'il shem klihu eagle. The name of the keli, the round form that they pressed the figs into, was called an eagle. V'darsan baktsios, they squish figs into this form, and v'nidbakim zubezu, they become pressed to each other. V'nas an eagle, it becomes like a big wheel, ke'en gevina, like cheese. So the keli that the eagle was made in was called an eagle, and the big wheel of pressed figs was referred to as an eagle as well. Okay, alpi. This is a very important key Rashi. Litrik tziyoshadarsa alpi eagle. Alpi means dafke nokat shenirst le'inayim. So you already had a full wheel that was pressed already, and now you just added on this litra. Because if, as the Gemara or the Bryce is going to explain soon, if you just took a litra of tziyos that were truma and you just mixed it into the wheel with everything else, and it's completely not discernible from the other figs that are all around it, everybody agrees that would be batal. The shaila here that it's not batal is you already had your full wheel, then you took one extra litra and you stipped it on top. So right when you stipped it on top, you knew that this extra was truma. It was quite visible and apparent that this little extra bit that you stipped on it was truma. But once all these igulim get mixed up, and now you have tons of them, now it's already hard to know which one it is and which part it is. And while you actually do it, you can see what you're doing. But once they get mixed in to many others in inventory in the warehouse, you'll never be able to find which one it was. So litrik tziyah darsa al pi eagle. Ve'ena yadua be'eza eagle darsa. Or al pi chavis. Instead of using the keli called an eagle, they used a barrel to squeeze the figs into. Ve'ena yadua be'eza chavis. And it's a warehouse full of these forms of figs, and you have no idea which one it is. Or darsa al pi kaveris. Kaveris is like a basket. And again, it would have a roundish form that they would also use to press figs into. Ve'ena yadua be'eza kaveris darsa. Here we have our machlokes, and we have a machlokes tanoim about a machlokes tanoim. So there's a machlokes tanoim, and then there's a machlokes between two other tanoim, what the first two tanoim are arguing about. Let's quickly have a look at Rashi. The Eina Yedua, Ezai Pi Kli Nesar. We know the top of one of these forms, the top area has the truma in it, but we don't know which one. Once you cut off the top layer, which is where the truma would have been, whichever one of these igulim it's on, everything below that we know for sure is chulin, because we didn't just mix these truma figs into the bunch; they were only pressed on top. So if we carved off all of the tops of all these igulin, the bottoms that remained for sure bichul. So therefore, she'ena truma mervusben ela hapumin levadom b'safek yiser. It's only the top of each pressed fig configuration. Only the top is a suffix as to whether or not it's truma, which one is the one that has truma. So zokt Rashi b'ayter Reb Meir v'Reb Yehuda peligi b'ha aliba de Reb Elazar v'Reb Yeshua. So let's see what the Gemara says. Rabbi Yeshua Aimer. I'm sorry, Rabbi Meir Aimer. Rabbi Meir says as follows. Rabbi Elazar Aimer, the sheet of Rabbi Elazar is the most kuladik. Royin es ha'el yoinos. You look at all of the tops of all these igulei devela, ki ilu hein prudois, as if they're separated and individual and mixed together with pieces of the bottom. In other words, you make believe that they're all unidentifiable. And therefore, you can actually use the full contents of all of these igulim to be mevatel the truma be'echad l'meya. Zok Rashi, roy noisan ke'ilu en prudois, afal pi she'en kan kuf pumen shel kuf kelim shel heter levata iser levata le'iser. Even though the only confusion we have is about which top is usher, and there's not enough tops to be mevatel the one top that's made out of truma. And the bottom of all these igulim, which definitely are chulin in every single one, they're not part of our mixture. They're for sure chulin. Nevertheless, you consider them in your calculation. Roinas kol litrois hatachtoinos v'ha'elyonos shebechol achelim prudos. You look like each litra was standing on its own, and they're all mixed together. The elyonim, the tachtoinim, v'zum u'reves b'chulim, and this one little litra is mixed into the multitude of other litros, which are the contents of the full igulim of all the ones that are mixed together. And therefore, in each barrel, there'll be enough of litra ktzios to be mavatal the truma in its own barrel. But if there's not, that's going on later. So that's the first sheet. You could even include all the contents of the whole barrel. Now we have to understand that really one is bottle and two. We learned yesterday acharei harab muhatas. These are al chumas derabanan. So Reb Meir's learning in Rabbi Lazar that you could use all of the contents of all of these figs. Indeed. To be mevatel eser.
You're gonna have to open your door.
So Zok to Gemara. That's the first shita. That's not the shita that we're going to say our Mishnah holds like. But then you have Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Im yesh meya pumin, if you have 100 pumin of heter, of chulin, keneged, the one that we're mixed up with, that there's truma, yalu, then it's bottle. V'mlav ha-pumin asurin, the tops would be asur, v'ashulayim utar, and the bottoms will be mutar. And Rashi says, because shatachtoinos, she'enon b'chlal asofik, ein malois ha-pumin. All the bottoms of all of these pressed figs are for sure not truma. All shows the top. Therefore, you can't use them to be mevatel the truma. Now we're going to get to where our Mishnah is coming from. Rabbi Yehuda's approach was much more machmer. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Lezer Omer, im yesh sham kuf pumin yalu im lav ha-pumin asurin. So the way Rabbi Meir understood the more churmidik ashita, the way Rabbi Meir understood Rabbi Yeshua, that's how Rabbi Yehuda understands Rabbi Lazar. And the way Rabbi Yehuda understands, I'm sorry. The way Rabbi Meir understood Rabbi Yeshua, that's how Rabbi Yehuda understood Rabbi Lazar. But the way Rabbi Yehuda understands Rabbi Yeshua is the most chomer. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, according to Rabbi Yehuda, afilu yesham shloisha meya ispumin lo yalu. This will never ever be bottled. Why will it never ever be bottled? Because a litra ktzios, even though it's always just sold lumped together with others, but since once every rare while a litra is sold on its own, 1 litra, 2 liters, 3 liters, that's enough to give it chashivas that it will not be bottled. So our Mishnah holds a behema is not bottled, holds like the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. In the shita of Rabbi Yeshua, that even something that even occasionally is sold by number will never be bottled. That was the Gemara's teretz to the B'kar, to the Tan of our Mishnah. It will be the shita of Rabbi Yeshua according to the understanding of Rabbi Yehuda. Gewaltig. However, what happens if darsa be'igel ve'en yodea be'ezem makom be'igel darsa? What if it's not at the top and distinctly at the top? So when it was originally placed there, we were able to see it. Rather, it was just got mixed in with all the rest of the many, many, many pounds of dried figs, and they were all, it was just pressed together, mished together in one big batter, if I can call it that, of pressed figs. So then, darsa bigel ben yideh be'ezem makom bigel, but you don't know where it is. Or darsa be'ezem makom bigel, darsa kama, either tzvayna, the Rhine on the north side, or the south side, then divrei kol yam. Then everybody holds that it would be bottled. And Rashi says, because this would not be considered anymore a davar shebeminyan, because it was never a distinct litra by itself. It was all mished together from day one. Let's see Rashi inside. Darsa beigel ve'eni yodea beis hamakom shedarsa b'makom ashulayim. It wasn't placed on the top. It was on the bottom. Shakli rachav. It's a big keli that these figs are pressed into. V'harba litroy seduras l'rachvay. And many litras are all mished together. It weighs many, many pounds, this huge wheel of figs. They're divra kol yal. Everybody holds that will be bottled. Since there is no isur be'en, shenidras v'nidvak ba'acheros milamalu milamato v'natzad, the liter of ketzios of truma never was distinct in this mixture. It's all mixed and surrounded and intermingled with other figs. That doesn't have a cheshivas. Therefore, ein kan dover shebeminyan klal. But if it was distinct when it became lost, then it will never ever be bought. So that is one shot in our Mishnah. It's going according to the Mandamar of Litra Ktzios. Rav Ashi Amar Afidu Temer Rabbanan. It doesn't necessarily have to even go according to the Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Shua. It could go according to anybody. But Balei Chaim Chashivi V'loi Botli. Maybe Balei Chaim are even more choshev than the Litra Ktzios. Maybe Balei Chaim are even more choshev than the fenugreek that Rameir was talking about. So maybe all the discussions that we had as to whether or not it's bottle or not, because it's a davar chashuv, davar sheyakilim lois, kol sheish lois, all those things are only negeya by inanimate things. But an animal is a davar chashuv, a balchai in and of itself, and everybody would agree that that would never be bottle. Gewaltig. So now the Gemara goes on to the next question. V'nimshoich v'nikroiv chad minai. Why don't you just go into the pen that has all these animals, one of which is Isser, and just take one. V'nema, and let's say, Kol de Parish, Meruba Parish. And let's say there's a rule. You go Acharab al-Hatos. If you randomly took one from a group, you should go Basar Roiv. And chances are the one that you took was from the Roiv of Ksherim, not from the meat of Psul. Frank to Gemara, Nimshaych, is that what you're really asking? Havalei kavua. That's exactly the case of kavua. You could have 9 kosher stores in a plaza, 1 treifa store, and you walked into the store and took iser from its source, or you potentially took iser from its source. There you don't go basarai. As Rashi says, nimshach bitmiya, mashma yikachim echod mitoich heder. You can walk right into this stall, into this flock where there's one iser mixed in and just take one at a time. The iser is kavua in this group. The kaimalon bisanhedrin. We learned in Mesechus Sanhedrin. Prat lezorg even legav. If someone doesn't directly take aim at somebody else to throw a rock, rather he throws it into the air into a group of people. Even if it's Roiv Yisrael, we say he's potter because kol kavua kamechza mechza. So nimshach havala kavua, turning on to Amid Bayis. So your suggestion would never work. Zog to Gemara. Okay, you're right. Ella, I have another way to break up the kol kavua kamechza mechza. Ella nichbeshinu. Put some of the animals in a very tight spot, and they'll be uncomfortable, and they'll be forced to break out. And now, if an animal breaks out, and you find him out of the flock, now he's parish. The name of kol the parish, meruba parish. So we have a way to engineer that we should have a parish. So you shouldn't have to go into the makam kavua and take one out. Rather, induce the animals to leave one at a time. Zok to Gemara, that wouldn't work. Amar Rabbi, you know why it wouldn't work? Although technically it will work, and although technically it would be bottled right, but the Rabban make a gzeir, that's too dangerous. Gzeir shema yavayu yud kayhanim b'vasachas v'yikravu. We're afraid that 10 kayhanim are going to come. Yes, they come out one at a time, and one at a time you took them and you brought them to a carbon. But in a rare occasion, it could happen that all these 10 animals are now in the Azar, they're shechted, and their blood is ready to be spritzed on the Mizbeach, and their meat is ready to be hooked on the Mizbeach, and they're all here together, meaning there's for sure going to be Isra here. That we can no longer be simcha. So in the odd event that occurs, we don't even let you force these animals or induce these animals to become parish, so that we could use the rule of kol the parish, meruba parish. Let's have a look at Rashi. Oh my Rava. Gzera Shema Yavoyu Yud Kayanim B'vas Achas V'yikruvu. At this point in the Gemara thinks, Hashto, the Chayish L'Shema Achar Sheyikchem Echad Echad. After one at a time, these animals escaped. They became a Kol Parish, Meruba Parish, and they became mutter. And you took them and you brought them as a carbon. They all landed up together in the Beis Hamikdash. And they shechted all 10 of them, even though it's one at a time, as karbanos. Vehem roiv. Now these 10 are roiv of the flock. So even if you don't do this to the entire flock, but you take out enough animals that represent roiv of the flock, so you can't say anymore kol the parish, meruba parish, because roiv of the flock is here. So therefore, we have to assume the Isser might be here. Ve'im roiv. And then what's going to happen is Yavoyu Yud Kaihanim, V'yizikru Demeyen, V'yaktirei Mureim, Ke'echad all together. And at this point, the Gemara holds V'efshel Tzamtzam, and it's possible to do all these avodas together. So come to Chosh, you're doing the avodah of 10 animals together, and they represent roiv of the Eidah that the Isser was mixed into. So therefore, we have to assume there's Isser here. The car of Ruba Bavasachas, the Ikal Mechash Isura Baruba Ise. We have to be choshen that the animal that's also is here amongst these animals that he has processed together. The Bishlamaki Moshiach Chad Chad Umakriv Kama Kama. If you take one at a time, you're makriv one at a time, and only then do you go get the second one. So never are you doing the avodah on any of these animals together. There Ikal Memer the Chad the Karv Beheter Meruba Parish. Every individual that you pulled out or that ran away from the pen that you got, separated from the roiv, from the ksher. And therefore, Visura Bahani Defaishi, who Davaruba Lagabe, the Isser remained in the pen. The one at a time animal that left the pen is only representing a miyat. And therefore, you'll say, called the parish, Meruba parish, it is from the much larger group of animals that are kosher. But now that you're bringing a roiv together, you can't say anymore that all these are parish meruba. They are the roiv. So therefore, have a hani the paishi or the prishi ruba lagabai. Now already they are roiv. They are roiv. So then it's possible that the isser is amongst there. So Zok Gemara, let's think about what you're saying over here, Zok Rabba. As each animal came out, it was gepaskined on it. Called the parish, Meruba parish. It was Gapaskin on. Now that they end up coming later together, you tell me the Isser comes back? So Frag the Gemara, somebody asked Rava, what are you saying? Elamayato, Migisa Asira. I don't understand. You're telling me that suddenly once the dam is in the Mizrach, suddenly became Usr? As each animal was shechted, it was already determined. Called the parish and Meruba parish. It's heter. So how could you suggest that suddenly it's going to revert back to Isser? Zok Gemara, no, that's not what it revert back. It's Mishum Shema Yavoyu Yud Kaihanim Bivas Achas V'yikhu. We're afraid the chashash is not that there will be a cold parish and then later on it'll become usher. I agree, it will not become usher. You know what the chashash is? The chashash is originally there'll be 10 koyanim that will come and take all of these animals together. Zok Rashi, Mishum Shema Yavoyu Yud Kaihanim Bivas Achas V'yikhu Mitoichat Haruvas. We're afraid 10 koyanim will pull 10 out right away. And that's already a problem. That's already a problem that it might be from the roiv, not they have the roiv with them, and therefore it's likely that one of these animals contain Isser. Frag to Gemara, but is it possible? How is it possible that they can all take 10 at a time? As Rashi says, Bishlam is Rika Baktara, Bishlam is just as Rika Daktara. Could be a line that they all did it at the same time. Think about it. What did you do here? You engineered it so that the animals should break out. So you put them into a squishy pen, and now a whole bunch of animals broke out. Now you're afraid at precisely the same moment 10 animals are going to be captured. They're animals that are running wild. You can't time it perfectly that every single animal should be captured and taken as a carbon at the exact same moment. It's impossible. You have to run after each one individually. There's not a chance that each one will be grabbed at exactly the same time. So therefore, you should still say kol the parish, meruba parish. Every individual animal that you found was from the roif, and it becomes mutter one at a time. And once it becomes mutter, how can you say it reverts back to becoming iser? Ella Amar Rava, you're right. You know what the gzera is mishum kavua. We're afraid that if we allow you to use this tactic of squishing the animals so that they should escape one at a time, we're afraid that you're going to actually go into the pen and not even get them to run away and take them all together. Because once people think it's mutter, they won't chop this eitzah that had to be done, that we have to squish them and get them to run out one at a time. No, they'll think you're just allowed to use these animals. And that's why we don't allow you to make this into a kol parish. So we need to stop for a second. Because the Gemara asks a very interesting question. The Gemara asks, are you going to tell me that once you said kol parish from Meruba parish, are you going to tell me that now that all the blood is here together, it reverts back and becomes usher? So let me ask you a question. What happens if you have a big pot full of hot dogs and they're kosher hot dogs, and one hot dog got mixed into the pot, but it's batal b'roif? So the halach is it's mutter. So my question is, are you allowed to eat all the hot dogs in this pot, even though you know one of them is for sure isser? But since it's batal b'roif, you say even the isser becomes heter. Or do you say, no, you can't eat them all. You can eat 2, 3 at a time, but to eat them all at once, you're guaranteed that you're eating isser that you wouldn't be able to. So the Marami Rotten brings a rye from our Gemara. What did our Gemara ask? Sure, as each animal was taken, you said kol de parish, miruba parish, and it's mutter. But if you take them all back together, if you have all their damim together, then you know for sure one of them here is the isser. So what is the problem? The Huber Rabbanon. He asked Rava, are you telling me it goes back to becoming Osir? Well, yes, because now we're guaranteed, we know that the Isser is here. So from this Gemara, from the fact that the Huber Rabbanon asked this kasha, the Marama written brings a raya that if you have Isser mixed into Heter, and it's batal b'roif, for instance, it's not a davar shebeminion, the halach is they all become mutter, and you're allowed to eat all the hot dogs. That's fiercely disputed. The Rishonim will argue on it and say Avadi wouldn't be able to eat all of them together. And in our case, the reason why Homer Rabbanim was asking the kasha is because you have to say that they didn't take all the animals. They have 10 animals that took out of the pen, but there's still some animals remaining. So therefore, the Homer Rabbanim asked, why should the Isser come back once we are already paskined on each individual animal that they're from the ksher? Okay, gewaltig. And I don't know what halacha l'maisa is. If a piece of Isser meat falls into your pot with a whole bunch of kosher meats, you're definitely allowed to eat all the meat. The question is, if you're allowed to eat them all together. Zog to Gemara weiter. Amarova. Now that we got to this point, Hashra the Ami Rabban, we got to the point that they said loy nak. When you have one animal of Isser that's mixed into 1,000 animals of heter, you shouldn't be makriv them. Well, what if you violated the halacha and you went and were makriv them? So that means you makriv a personal animal. You were makriv an isur hana on the mizbeach. You were makriv by roivei and nirva on the mizbeach. You did. It's a bigger there. But all the other animals were regular good karbonos. Were you at least Yosy your karbonos that you did? So Zog to Gemara, Amarava Hachtam Rabbanin loy nakriv. If you wrongfully go and are makriv this carbon that Chazal told you don't, loy maratze, it won't be maratze. The carbon will be possible. Eisvei Rafuna Rab Yehuda. Eisvei Rafuna Bar Yehuda Rab Rabban. So Rafuna Bar Yehuda Asakash Rava. How could you say it's not maratze? We have a brisa. Chatos shenis arva ba'oila. And we're talking about a chatos ha'oif that was nisar with an oilus ha'oif. So you don't have the eitzah of Yirachi Istabu, because there's no din mumin by Oifais. So Chatos Shenis Arba Ba'oila, the Oila Shenis Arba B'chatos, Afilu Achas Beriboy, even if it's one Oila in 10,000 Chatois, or one Chatos in 10,000 Oilois, Yamusu Kulon, all these birds have to be destroyed. When do we say they all have to be destroyed? That's by a coin that asked the Shaila by the Dayanim and the Paskin, he shouldn't use these birds, and he listened to them. But what if the coin didn't ask the rabbi and he wrongfully was makriv of these animals? If it's a coin who didn't ask what to do, and therefore he was makriv wrongfully these birds on the mizbeach, then as follows. If he was makriv all these carbons and he treated them like an oila, then mechza kosher, mechza pasul. The ones that were supposed to be oilos do work. The ones that were supposed to be chatois don't work. Lamata, if he did them all like a korban chatos, then mechza kosher umechza pasul. The chatois are kosher, the others are pasul. But if it was achas lamata, achas lamayla, if some on top and some on bottom, then shneim psulos. Shani oimer, because maybe either one was brought in the wrong place. Chatos kreva lamayla, ba'oila kreva lamayla. So you see black and white that the fact that lechatchila was also to be makriv any of these birds, where the Brisa says lechatchila yamusu, if the kohen didn't listen to the psak and he was makriv them wrongfully anyway, it will be a kosher carbon, those that were processed properly. So how could you, Rava, tell me that if you wrongfully were makriv all these chatois, at least the kosher carbonis will be kosher, yeah, and you'll be over for being makriv, at least or Isra Mizbeach, but at least the karbonis, you're not going to be Yosy. Here you see clearly that you are Yosy the karbonis that you brought, even though you were not supposed to bring the entire group. It's totally in the machloikis. Ha command Amar Balechayim Nitchin, Ha command Amar Balechayim Nitchin. What do we have over here in these cases? We have live animals that are now also to be brought on the Mizbeach, because the psak halach on them is, since they're in a mixture, they shouldn't be brought, they should all be yamusu. That's called hutcha. They're temporarily not able to be brought on the Mizbeach. Now, even if later on you could figure out which was which, or in this case you're makriv them anyway, it doesn't make the animal kosher. Once it's hutcha, as we learned this concept earlier in karbonis, once something is hutcha, it never comes back. There was a shaila if you could say that by a live animal. So Rava in our Mishnah learns that Balechayim Nitchin, and therefore once there was an Isser placed to be makriv of these animals, they're all going to be possible. The Brisa holds Balechayim Einam Nitchin, and therefore you could be makriv of them. So the Achronim asks a very simple question. Rava said this on his own. That if you were makriv them when you weren't supposed to, like the Mishnah says, you're not Yosy. It doesn't say that in our Mishnah. That's Rava saying it on his own. So the Achronim ask, how did Rava know to learn our Mishnah that way? So I saw very interesting, I just pulled up a sifta to remind myself, but I think I just remembered the answer. I saw very interesting. What does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, Kulam Yamusu. Why didn't the Mishnah say that you could do an eitzah, take one out at a time, and then be makriv them? The Mishnah doesn't say that. The Mishnah is Kulam Yamusu. Why does the Mishnah say that? Obviously, because the Mishnah is telling us that no matter what, there would be no possible way to be mad to these animals. So I'm not saying that the question is you should have been nichbah, should have died, you forced them to escape. But no, just leave them in a normal pen. Don't induce them to escape. You just wait. If you wait long enough, eventually an animal is going to escape. That there's no problem. The whole gzeira of Mishum Kavua was only if you induced them to escape. But if you don't induce them to escape, maybe the Mishnah could have just said, wait, just wait. Eventually the animal will leave and you can be marked of that animal. The teretz must be that our Mishnah holds up to Rava that once it's in a matzah that you can't bring it as a carbon, it's nitcha permanent. Frag the Gemara, harei shchutin, the lakula almanitchin. we have a case where an animal was shechted already. It's no longer a balchai. Everybody holds up a shchutin. It will be nitcha if it had a psul. Yet we learned a halacha. Yet we learned halacha by shchutin as follows. Let's turn on to the Amud Bayis. So let's turn on to Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph. Utanan, Rabbi Elazar Omer, Imkarav Haroish Shal Echad Mahen, Yikruvu Kalaroishim. And what was the case? The case was one puzzle got mixed in to many ksherim. Actually, we should really go back to Ayin Gimel Amud Beis because Rashi there elaborates on the case. Zokt Rashi all the way at the bottom. What was the case? There was a vorim of kachim, and one of them was a balmum, and there was many regular kosher karbanos, and the avarim got mixed together, and you cannot tell which avarim need to go onto the mizbeach, and which avarim are from a balmum that you cannot put on the mizbeach. So the Mishnah says, Rabbi Elazar Omer, im kodim shenimlach ba hikruv echad min haroshim. What if before they asked the shaila what to do, they were already makriv one of the heads? So he holds yikruv kol haroshim. Now all of the rest of the heads you could be makriv. V'afilu lechatchila. You know why? Ditalina nisura ba'isay shekar bishon. They'll say that the one that you were already makriv, that was probably the iser, and the rest of the heads are the tamimim that you could be makriv on the mizbeach. In this case, the ilu asi b'reisha libluchi. If somebody would ask the shaila, should I be makriv any of the heads? Amalei loy sakriv. They would have told him you're not allowed to be makriv because we have a head over here of a balmum. Nevertheless, if he didn't ask and then he was maktir one, we allow all the rest to be hukrav on the mizbeach. So you see, even by a mace, you see that you do have the concept of kivin jehutchu loy hutchu. You see, it could still come back. So once again, the kasha is on Rava. Why would you say if someone was makravir of all these karbanos that they're not good? So tomorrow, that's a different chiddush. Rabbi Elazar has a radical chiddush that he doesn't hold of tchi at all. Hu Amar ki Chanana Mitri. We learned about him at the beginning of the Masechta. The Tanya Chanana Mitri Omer. If you have the Sir Lazazel and the Sir Hashem, we know that if one of them has a problem, you have to replace both of them. But Chanana Mitri says you never have to. Afidu dam b'kois, even though you made shchita already on the Sir Hashem, and you already were mekabel the dam, and you're ready to do zrika, and then something happens to the Sir Azazel and disappears, you don't have to redo everything. Merely maybe chaverei umezavim. You just bring another Lazazel, and you don't have to redo anything. Why? Because he holds there's no dichi at all. Okay, let's stop here. And Bez Hashem, we'll be mamshich tomorrow. Everybody should have an awesome day and a very safe trip. For those who are traveling, I'm very honored and humbled that you're coming. Thank you so much.
Yosy.
Just pulling up to Buffalo Shul now.
Oh, gewaltig. Okay, be well.
Okay, we'll see you.